Actually, I very rarely remember my homilies, like once I've preached it kind of goes out of my head. But I actually remember this gospel from 3 years ago and the homily I prepared because of something funny I noticed. It made me laugh when I read what was going on in this gospel. And so let me just picture the scene from you. So Jesus has just got back from the synagogue at the start of this gospel, and based on that episode, which wasn't included in last week's gospel, it kind of came after, Jesus basically told everyone, I'm the guy, and the synagogue officials and priests are like, no, you're not, and they try and throw him off a cliff. So it's been a tough day, day in the life of Jesus. Pretty tough. Probably tough for his new disciples who thought, what have we let ourselves in for with this guy? He's proclaiming that he's the Messiah, the one, and he's getting himself killed. This doesn't sound very good for us. So after a long day's work, as we enter into this gospel today, wouldn't it be nice, after going through all that trauma and all that suffering, if someone was there at home just with a sandwich? Maybe run a bath, cook something good, put your favourite TV show on. Wouldn't it be nice if after all that stress you came home to that? How many people come home to that? Not many, right? But Jesus gets back to Simon's house, Simon Peter. And Simon's mother-in-law has gone to bed with a fever. She's not feeling very well. She's probably old. It's probably the equivalent of having a bad case of COVID, if we're being honest, because fevers were deadly back in the day. And being the mother-in-law, sort of the matriarch of the house, she was probably the one who did the housekeeping. If anyone was going to cook something for the men coming home from a hard day's fishing, it would have been her. But she can't because she's in bed with fever. So they get in, and what's the first thing Simon Peter and the disciples do? Maybe they've been around Peter's house before. They go, Jesus, our mother-in-law is sick with fever. We're really, really worried about her. So Jesus is like, okay, fine, I'll heal her. And what's the first thing they ask her to do? What's the first thing she does? She goes and makes them a sandwich. Now, do we think that their motives were pure? Do we think they were perfect? Hopefully they are, but perhaps there was just something in it for them. But here's a deeper reflection on that episode in the Gospel, because this is the only time in the Gospels and in all of the epistles that we see that any one of the apostles has a wife. If Simon Peter has a mother-in-law, it means he has a wife. It means he probably has children. He has a family to support. Now put that in the context of what's going to happen with Peter. Very soon, Peter will leave his mother-in-law, he'll leave his wife, and he'll leave his children to follow Jesus. Who thinks that's a good thing, that he abandons his wife and family, for whatever reason? It's not, is it? It doesn't sound very good. And yet it happens, and it seemingly happens with Jesus' blessing. Now, if Peter had come to me, say for example, for some reason I was Jesus' parish priest, I was a local rabbi, and Peter's in two minds, and he says, look, Jesus, he's changed my life, I've got to follow him, I've got to leave it all and follow him. I'll tell you what my advice would have been. Say, you have a responsibility. Your responsibility is your wife and child. A true follower of Jesus would do that. And I'm sure Jesus would agree. But here's the thing. Jesus doesn't tell us what to do. He doesn't have a control over our freedom. He leaves us perfectly free. He only knows what we are going to do with our freedom. And he acts accordingly. So perhaps aside from all the humour of healing the mother-in-law for convenience sake and whatever, perhaps Jesus saw another value in the healing of the mother-in-law, knowing the kind of person Peter was, knowing what he would do, even if it didn't get his own personal blessing. He left someone behind to look after the family. He brought the mother-in-law effectively back to life. I think this is what God does most of the time. He is looking after us. He is a loving Father. The gospel is costly. The gospel takes a pound of flesh from us, and not everyone gets away scot-free. But because it's good news, and because it must be preached, the grace of God, a loving Father, supplies for what we lack. He fills in the gap if we trust him. And it's that trust which gives us the basis in our suffering, in our deprivation, to continue to live the gospel and take responsibility for our portion of God's work. Simon's the first one, isn't he? After they've healed the mother-in-law, he's the first one to leave the home, to look for Jesus. He's the first one to speak to Jesus. Say, everyone is looking for you. He's impetuous, he's stupid, he gets all kinds of things wrong. And he got this one wrong with his family. But because of Jesus, because of his grace, we now revere him as a saint, and we give thanks to God for looking after us.